Hello, everybody. We are live again for another Surviving Quarantine by Spreading Life. And I'm excited today because I have Mark with me. Mark is somebody that I met through LinkedIn and then got to know more about him. And just a brief introduction about Mark. Mark is an author of the Shingo Award-winning book, Lean Hospitals, Improving Quality Patient Safety and Employee Engagement. Mark is also co-author with Joe Schwartz, Healthcare Kaizen, Engaging Frontline Staff in Sustainable Continuous Improvements, also a Shingo recipient, and the Executive Guide to Healthcare Kaizen. His recent book is Measures of Success and To React Less, Lead Better, Improve More. He is also the founder of www.leanblog.org, which, as you were saying, you've been doing this for 16 years.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he also serves as a consultant to organizations through his company, Constancy Incorporated. And he is also a senior advisor to the technology company, KaiNexus. So he has a full out. He also has a BS in industrial engineering from Northwestern and an MS in mechanical engineering and an M.B.A. from Massachusetts Institute of Technology Leaders for Global Operation Programming. Mark and his wife live in Texas, but are in this whole moving process. And so that's the reason that I love that you came on to talk with us today about living well in small places.
Yeah. Texas is all about big places and everything being bigger, but I should update the bio because my wife and I had been in Orlando for almost 3.5 years because of her job. She had an assignment there. And so we lived in a high-rise condo building that had about 100 units across like 15 stories. And if you can believe it, even during the pandemic and all this, and the conversations started before that, she got recruited away from her company and she started a new job Monday in Los Angeles, 2,500 miles away. And
Wow.
So we are here in a temporary apartment. So I'm seeing a different apartment complex, and it's kind of giving me different things to look at and think about for our topic today.
That is awesome. So let's get into it. What challenges does living in a small condo place differ than, as you know, and we've talked that I live on a farm, I have land, and you can think Texas, like it's the more room, the better for us. So I cannot give any advice on it. So I love that you're here to talk with us. What are some of the challenges that people are facing in living well in small places?
So, I mean, small places are, higher density, we're not in a tiny house out in the middle of a huge ranch. There's potentially more contact with people directly and indirectly. Just for me to leave the condo or to leave this apartment requires an elevator, which requires pressing buttons. It requires interacting with a door. So there are, I think, additional points of risk, even if I'm staying home a lot. But, in the apartment here, and people were doing this in Orlando, here there are signs saying it's not just a courtesy, like it's required. So, to leave to go out in the common areas, like even to go get your mail.
Oh, wow.
Put on a mask. This is a cloth mask that my friend and fellow author in the lean space, Karen Ross, made this for me, which was really sweet of her because she was making masks and my wife and I didn't know where we were going to get a mask, and we don't sew.
Awesome.
So she sent that. So I just want to give a shout out and a thank you to her for that if she ends up watching this. But so wearing masks, there's probably, before we talk more about what is specific to high density living, I think can I share a couple of tips about masks? So there's a couple of thoughts. One is, if you're going to a grocery store, out to a place where you need to wear a mask into the business, it seems really the best practice is put the mask on at home before you leave. Don't put it on in the car, in the parking lot. And part of the reason for this is you want to make sure your hands are clean. So you want to wash your hands with soap and water, hot water, 20 seconds, and then put the mask on and try to do so in a way, I'm not going to really put it on, but put it on in a way, in a manner so that you're not touching the mask. I mean, you could touch the corners. If your hands are clean and the mask is clean, it's really not that risky at this point to touch it. But once you get the mask on, like over your nose and your mouth, it's really important, like, commit to the mask. You're going to do the mask. You're doing the mask until you get all the way back home. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, if you're having to adjust it and fuss with it, you could have contaminated your hands and then you've touched the mask, or you're out and about and you touch something and you touch the mask. You don't want to be constantly adjusting it. If you pull it down under your chin and now you're touching it, and like there's no reason to create that risk. I know masks can be uncomfortable and it's not great, but if you're going to put it on. And then, when you get home, a good practice that I was taught, and they do this in healthcare, but when you go to take the mask off, grab it, undo the straps, and hold the mask by the straps, because you don't know if the outside is contaminated, and then you could maybe take it and just throw it right into the washing machine. If you got a mud room or whatever. We're in an apartment, we don't have a mud room, small space, but the washing machine is very near the door. So I think those are some tips for people in general. Don't pull it down to talk to somebody. That defeats the purpose too. Talk through the mask. You may have to speak up a little bit, but masks are important in high density spaces, and I think they're important for everyone else too.
Yeah, and that's something that I like that you said, is commit to the mask, because that's what from somebody that has like the safety background, and I've seen a few memes put up. It's like, now everybody knows how safety professionals feel, because you'll see them here and you'll see them like, or I've seen the one where people will have gloves on and they'll like take the glove off and hold it in the mouth while they're texting.
No.
And so, what else should people know, or what should they do about, like you talked about the elevator? That's one thing. And for us, we don't have to go around contact or the door handles and some other things. What are some general tips that you have? Because you literally just traveled from Orlando to California.
Right.
What are some tips that you learned in that drive as well?
Well, I mean, we were being really mindful of hand hygiene and mask hygiene. So even if you're not driving cross country, you might still have to go get gas, even though friends of mine, everyone's saying like, nobody's really driving anywhere. So how much gas do you need? The gas pump is a risk. So paper towels can be your friend. Grab a couple paper towels and use it to grab the pump I'm going to do this to the camera. You can put it over your finger and use it to push buttons. Throw the paper towel away. If you've got Clorox wipes, you could try to use the wipe, and then there's some maybe residual benefit that you're wiping it down for somebody else. Now, I'll admit, like going into a gas station to use the bathroom, I did not put a mask on every single time, because I think part of the question is your proximity to other people. So there's the Texas chain and of these enormous gas stations with these enormous stores. And I think we went to one in Louisiana or Alabama, but it's called Buc-ee's. Well, Buc-ee's is going to be crowded because they have really big, really clean bathrooms. Now, an advantage there was that, they're big enough. It's like an airport. You walk in without having to touch a door, which is good. Going into Buc-ee's, I would wear a mask because I thought my odds of being able to stay more than 6 feet away from people were slim. But if it was a smaller town or a place where I felt like I might be the only one in there, I wouldn't wear a mask, but I would be really mindful of doors and surfaces and not touching my face. And of course, like washing my hands before this gets a little too personal, but washing my hands before and after using the bathroom, and being really super mindful to not touch my face. Washing your hands goes into that category of things like it can't hurt. I mean, it might make your hands a little dry. My wife's been putting lotion on her hands, but there are certain practices here where, if in doubt, okay, go ahead. So should I have worn a mask into every single one? Probably. But there's also something to be said where if you were to walk through droplets in the air and they're on the mask, and now, you've got to worry about touching the mask again. Like we've pretty much used these cloth masks like one time, and then it goes in a plastic bag, and then it was going into the washing machine when next time we could. So we had a limited supply of masks. So I didn't really want to risk contaminating any of the masks along the way. So that's probably the biggest tip, is be careful at gas stations.
Yeah, I understand that. And I could see that aspect of it too. And that's the thing with the mask, that they are to help you, spreading, not from you, in essence, getting it. So,
Right.
and that's one thing I feel like a lot of people are, that's why, like you said, commit to the mask. Like if you can't commit,
Right.
it probably is best that you, one, don't go out, but two, then don't wear it,
Right.
because you're actually getting yourself more at a risk and a chance. And so what about, like, again, elevators? Like, how do you press the buttons? Like, how do you, and it's so weird that we even have to even think about these things right now.
So a couple strategies, like for a while, I would use my knuckle instead. If I'm going out for a walk, going out for an exercise walk, I don't have to wear a mask, and I don't feel like it's necessary. There would be risk of running across somebody in the building. There would be risk of touching a surface and then touching my face while I'm out for a walk. So I would use my knuckle, because I figured the odds of me inadvertently scratching my face with the back of my hand are lower. I think even better yet is using a little elbow. Now, the accuracy is not as good. My wife and I have both hit the wrong floor, but you got to be patient. And I think one of the themes that's helpful here is just trying to be patient, being considerate. So wearing a mask is partly, like you said, to be considerate to others, but using something other than your fingertip. I've used a key fob. You can push the button with the key fob. Now there's the risk that the fob is contaminated. So there are times I have taken Lysol cleaning spray to my keys or to a fob. So I think, with elevators, you've got to be careful about contact. You don't want to overcrowd an elevator. Like at our condo, there was pretty much policy of one person at a time, which again, that requires patience and courtesy. My wife and I, we could ride together because we were quarantined together. But if the elevator opens and someone's already on it, I'm like, I'm good. I'll wait for the next one. Where in the past that might have run the risk of seeming offensive, but I think now people get it. So being careful about overcrowding. And then I've also learned, like, don't be in a rush. Like that door opens, there's a risk that you might literally bump into someone, and now if you're wearing a mask, that mitigates the risk. But like, just take it slow. I'm not the most patient person, but I've really been trying to remind myself, just slow down. I don't really have that many places to be right now.
And I love that that's almost a beauty of this too, is that we seem to go very fast paced. So what is one of the things that you learned from this experience so far that you didn't think that, or something new that you learned from this that you almost want to like stick going forward?
Oh, that's a good question. I would love the patience and courtesy to continue to be a habit for myself. I think it does make me reflect along those lines of like, what's really worth getting upset about? And trying, so in the spirit of patience. So like, this is not limited to high density living, but if someone is going to go out and get takeout food. So, my wife and I have done that. And when we were doing that in Orlando, we were either walking or driving to a restaurant that generally wasn't that crowded. So there wasn't a lot of proximity to people. Some restaurants had really good processes where like the bag was sitting there on a counter with your name on it, and you've already paid online and come and grab and go, like pretty contactless. But my wife came home from work here in LA on Tuesday, which, was not just Taco Tuesday, it was Cinco de Mayo. And we had been cooking, and she had said, well, there's a Mexican place half mile away. Let's go and walk, and we'll put in an order and we'll go get food. And they said, it'd be ready in 20 minutes. Okay, it's about a 20-minute walk. We got down there. This was a place that did not have their processes figured out. So now, as a process person and a safety-minded person, I was really uncomfortable that there were dozens of people around the front of the restaurant and on the sidewalk waiting for their food, and there wasn't a clear process. And there was a rumor going around that the restaurant was running 90 minutes behind of when they said food would be available. And there was a guy working there was like, who else wants to cancel their order? Like there were more people canceling orders than picking up food.
Oh, wow.
So I was a little irritated with it, I will admit, but I don't think I was as irritated as I would have been normally, because I'm sure this is hard for the restaurant of trying to figure out a completely new way of doing business. Now, I hope they learned from what happened on Tuesday.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something too with the patients, that you literally, again, going from across the nation, you had to stop at like drive-throughs or gas stations. And it's like, there's so much more time period that you even have, like, you want to get there. So what's something on that you learned about in this time that was a little bit different that you wouldn't expect on your normal?
Well, so when we've done long drives before, like we've driven from Texas to Florida and back and forth, we love like stopping, like we would stop in Tallahassee and find some fun local farm to table restaurant and sit down and like take our time and have a lunch. Here, we're like, no, that's just not in the cards this time. So we ate a lot of snacks along the way, nuts and protein bars and whatever, instead of stopping for lunch. Now, we did stop in, I think it was Alabama. We stopped at a Chick-fil-A because what I know about Chick-fil-A, for one, I like their food. Two, they are known for having very good processes. And I thought if there was any place where I could trust their safety and cleanliness and hygiene practices, we decided we could trust Chick-fil-A. But yeah, I mean, we minimized the restaurant time. We didn't have to stop at hotels, so we would go and get takeout for that. But yeah, I mean, I guess the strategy was just minimizing contact. And some of the hotels were doing a better job with some of their practices than others, and that's similar, I think, maybe to the restaurants. That some organizations are somehow a little bit more process focused, or they're a little bit more nimble of figuring out a good way of doing these new things. You know,
I agree, and that's the one thing I want to talk about too, is that me and you, we can get nerdy on processes, and that's something that the lean and that aspect of it. How important is it now that people have processes, like? Not just for the fact that it's the fact that they matter, because just like Chick-fil-A, I'm not gonna lie, it's the only place I've been going to. I went to one other place, but Chick-fil-A has been it because I love their processes and I'm a nerd to study their processes.
Yeah. And they use Lean Six Sigma formally.
Yes. And so whenever you look at these companies and they're like, it really doesn't matter, we don't have to, like, what is your advice? Let's go for companies right now, or for anybody that's watching this that is in the position to make the importance of letting people know clear processes and the importance of holding true to them, in how it's a longevity story in essence.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the need to develop process. There's the need to do process improvement, if not proactive problem solving. Right. So I had a chance to do a webinar earlier today where I presented about the idea of not just doing reactive root cause problem solving, right? Because there's a software company, KaiNexus, that I'm an advisor to and an investor in, and that team has been working completely remote for 2 months now, and so they're starting to think, even if they're going to go back to offices, that they have to be really proactive in thinking about the risks. So if we're going to geek out on these topics, I shared a methodology called FMEA, or failure mode effects analysis. So we're having to be proactive, and the leadership team at KaiNexus is doing this, of thinking, what are all the possible ways that one employee could possibly pass the virus to another as an asymptomatic carrier, right? So the first rule would be, if you're feeling sick, if in doubt, stay home. But there's all kinds of questions now about desk layout. It's an open office, so do cubicle walls or partitions have to enter the equation now? The door has a knob that has to be handled. Is there a way of doing some sort of automated door? What about the break room? And if people are going to touch things, I think my plea to businesses would be to be proactive. We can't rush into this. And there's different levels of rigor, right? So I don't think anyone's just rushing into it. But we can be, FMEA and methodologies like that help us be pretty systematic and rigorous and engage everybody in brainstorming the possible risks. What are the things that could go wrong? So when you think about mitigation, right? The Wall Street Journal this morning, this topic was on my brain, and there was an article about the Oklahoma City Thunder and how basically the team logistics manager was doing exactly that. If they're going to reopen the practice facility, he was doing walkthroughs, and proactively, the article mentioned at least 8 or 9 things that they're going to do. They used to have a fingerprint scanner for getting into the building, and they're like, no, that doesn't seem good at all now. So they could probably go to something that is a proximity badge that doesn't require contact, or if they want to get fancy, they could do an iris scan. But I'll give them credit for really trying to be proactive and saying we're going to have to change the way we do things, and not just get good, not get better at reacting to a bad event. We've got to prevent bad events.
I love that. And that's something too that I think is very big, and is that one, it's being the proactive, and then 2, seeking people, and not in a lot of times it seems that lean gets a bad name, or some of these processes get bad names because they're thrown at people.
Right. And that's
yeah. And that's where people get bad, because processes are awesome. Whenever they're come together and it's a collective of ideas. So, and I think that's a good, also too, little segue. I know that you have your book too. And in your book, a lot of it, you talk about react less, lead better, improve more. And so how you talk about react less, like you just did, lead better. What is one way in this aspect too? And I think that you can lead like in these higher density places by being also leaders, by showing up and being an example. So what are some ways that you can lead no matter where you're at?
Well, I think leading by example in terms of different, personal protective practices, leading by example and wearing a mask the proper way. Now, at the condo building in Orlando, especially when masks were new, there's a front desk person during the day, there's a maintenance person, there's a housekeeping person, there's a building manager. Now, they all had N95 masks. So I'll say probably the management company procured those and had them available. So I'll say, thumbs up to them. But like there were times where I would see pulling N95s are even harder to breathe through, they say. But pulling it down to talk, or having it down around their chin. And I didn't want to put anyone on the spot in person, but 2 different times, like I sent a note to the building manager saying, please accept this in the spirit of me being concerned about people's health and safety. But please remind, and I saw him doing it too, but it was like, please remind the staff, if they're going to wear the mask, commit to the mask. That might have been the first time I had the thought, commit to the mask, pass through my head, and remind them, don't pull it down to talk. You've got it. So I think I didn't want to come across as a scold, but I think sometimes leadership means speaking up and trying to politely correct somebody, and I care about you, and here's the reason why, not just you're doing it wrong. And so hopefully that was helpful. I think hopefully I was exhibiting some positive leadership there.
And I agree with that. And I think it's that we say that leadership is a lot about that love aspect, and that's to be patient, kind, honest. Honesty sometimes gets knocked out of it, but to be honest and understanding and giving that grace during that time. So I think it's coming from the heart of empathy and coming to say that you care. And then also, one of your big things about your book is to improve more. So as somebody that does a lot of self-improvement aspects of it, and then also the work, again, going in and helping organizations from the grand level to the micro level, all the way through improving, what is some advice that you would give to people during this time to improve more, but not put these over daunting expectations on themselves that don't work.
Yeah. So, that subtitle of measures of success, is meant to be a bit of a summary, like you were saying, react less, lead better, improve more, and one leads to the other, which leads to the other. So of course, there is a time and a place to react. But one of the traps that organizations fall into is reacting to every up and down in some metric or performance measure. And a friend of mine who is the director of process improvement at a health system in Ohio, he's read my book, and they brought me in to teach a class about it. And they've been using this methodology called process behavior charts. And during their preparation for what they thought or feared would be a big wave of COVID-19 patients. And they're in kind of smaller town, Eastern Ohio, not one of the big cities. They had a dashboard, and one of the metrics they were tracking was the number of employees calling off sick, because they were looking for indicators of staff either getting sick or maybe being afraid to come in. Mm-hmm. And that number, so you could have a meeting and someone might say, oh, well, yesterday we had 8 people call off sick and it was 6 the day before. I don't like that trend. Well, 2 data points might not be a trend. And so they're using this process behavior chart methodology to show that the number of people calling off sick on a weekday basically kind of randomly fluctuates around an average. Mm-hmm. And so then they're not wasting time trying to over-explain every up and down, which means they can then focus their time and efforts on real improvement work. Explaining a metric doesn't mean we're improving the metric. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we're reacting to every metric, and when there's one that maybe shows a statistical signal where there has been some meaningful change that is worth reacting to, it's worth understanding, explaining, putting countermeasures in place for. So that was one example, and I've seen like friends of mine, people I know who've read the book, and they're using the methodology, and they're posting on Twitter. Here's a chart showing the percentage of COVID-19 tests that are positive. Mm-hmm. And if that number is just fluctuating within a range, or it had been fluctuating around kind of a high average and now it's suddenly dropped, some people say that's good news. When the positive rate goes down, it means more people are getting tested, and there's probably not a growth in the number of cases. You could plot the number of cases, the number of deaths, and you can see where sadly there's a period of increase. Mm-hmm. And then it starts to level out, and you can see that statistically. But again, when any of these metrics are in a range of kind of just fluctuating around an average, it's not yet on its way down to zero, but it's fluctuating around an average. Whether it's government officials or the media, I think people are better served by understanding the difference between, if you will, noise and a metric. Is it fluctuating, or is there a signal? And that's why I wrote the book. This methodology that I learned, I didn't invent this, but I'm passing along. Process behavior charts help separate signal from noise. And that's really helpful as leaders or anybody who's responsible for a city, a state, a country. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I agree. And I think that's the thing, even no matter where you're at, the noise and eliminating some of that racket that can make us look at things, because 80% of our time, our thoughts will go to the negative. And so we already are inundated or basically created to automatically try to fight off of fight or flight. So is the noise being a stressor that it shouldn't be? And so knowing when to look at it, when is it actually a proper time? And so I love the work that you do and how you are doing it. And so.
Well, I was going to say also, just if I can, sometimes if the data is showing a positive, we want to be careful in reacting to that, right? So we might see one day where the number of cases or the number of deaths has really dropped. That might not be a reason to say, well, let's open everything up right away. Mm-hmm. Like that data point could be an anomaly due to bad data or some other factor. Sometimes you need a couple of data points to start detecting that, yes, there's a meaningful change in that metric. And now maybe we can start thinking about making some changes to our system.
Yes. And again, that's back to that, what we talked about earlier, patience.
Yeah.
having patience to be able to see it through and see it out, because a lot of times we as people, we rush to quick judgment, and we rush to think, especially I'll say what I've found too in my experience is that if people have worked on it really, really hard in a process and then they see positive numbers, they throw it out like, see what I did, see what I did. And then it's like, oh, wait, we still got it. We see it. We acknowledge it. We hope that it continues. And we do believe in what it is, but we do have to be patient to see it through fruition because you want it sustainable. And that's the thing is that this is a sustainability measure and to help with it all. So
yeah, well said.
I love everything that you do, and I'm just blessed to know you and so grateful and thankful that you have came on today. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them up or comments. You're more than welcome to put your comments up. And in that space, I do want to, again, just highlight Mark's new book that has came out a few weeks ago, actually. And it is Measures of Success, React Less, Lead Better, Improve More. So if you are a process nerd, definitely.
Yeah. And sorry to correct you on it, but it was a few weeks ago last year.
Last year, yes.
Yeah. So it's it had its first birthday. We didn't throw a party for it. But
but I appreciate y'all. Appreciate everybody. I appreciate you, Mark.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on here.
Have an awesome and blessed day, everybody.
Be safe, everyone.